Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. We are gathered here today to appreciate the impact of and say goodbye to one of our country's greatest storytellers. Stanley Martin Lieber was born December 28, 1922 in Manhattan, New York City. I wouldn't be surprised if none of you have heard of Stanley Martin Lieber, but I would be surprised if you've never heard of his pen name, Stan Lee. Stan Lee is credited with creating a ton of superheroes that have inundated our modern popular culture. Heroes such as Spider-Man, the X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, Black Panther, amongst many others. Stan died in November of 2018 from natural causes. For many of Stan's fans, including myself, we enjoyed reading Stan's stories from that time because the characters he depicted were much more relatable than those in other comics, such as Batman, who went home to a mansion and millions of dollars every night, or Superman, who had the quintessential American dream as Clark Kent. Peter Parker, or Spider-Man, was a nerdy, poor teenager who couldn't get a date. Daredevil was a blind attorney who struggled with his Catholic faith. Iron Man, Tony Stark, suffered from alcoholism. And the X-Men endured segregation and prejudice anytime they left their home. By doing this, Stan gave credibility to a medium that was not very much respected at that time. By making his characters relatable and applicable to people of all ages, Stan was able to make a name for himself. So let's begin by looking at Stan's impacts on the comic book industry and then on popular culture. Stan is known for the application of contemporary issues into the development of his characters and their subsequent storylines. In particular, Fantastic Four was heavily inspired by the space race of the 1950s and 60s. Communication professor and comic book scholar Jeffrey Klain produced an essay in May 2021 in the Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics, praising Lee and longtime collaborator Jack Kirby for their matching of scientific specifics of the 1960s and instead of being over the top or exaggerated. Also occurring in the 1950s and 60s was the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Many comic books back then were not hesitant to show racist material in their depiction of people of other cultures or minorities. Stan Lee, however, would not have this. In the early 1960s, Stan created another popular character by the name of Dr. Strange, whose world is heavily influenced by the Orient and Asian culture. Stan and Kirby again strived in their ability to refrain from over-exaggerating the features of the characters depicted in their comic books as well as the practices. In fact, a 2015 article published by Implicit Religion, writer Joel Gruber argues that Stan Lee purposefully avoided the pop fascination of Asian practices that was gripping American culture in the early 1960s so that he would not alienate his Asian audience. Apart from his work in comic books, Stan Lee also had a great career as a producer, launching Marvel Comics multimedia company in the early 1980s. While there, he produced several television shorts, cartoons, video games, and eventually films in the late 1990s, starting with Blade and 2000's X-Men. Stan himself has appeared in over 110 Marvel projects, including films, television shows, cartoons, video games, and commercials. If you watch any movie made by Marvel between the years of 2000 and 2018, you'll find a Stan Lee cameo in it. I've actually had the distinct pleasure of seeing Stan Lee in person speak. It was in January of 2006 at the Clark State Performing Arts Center's Kuss Auditorium, and this is the original program for that event. And at this event, Stan talked for maybe a little over an hour, and it was an amazing experience. Even at, I think he was about 83 at the time, he was just so jovial and was just a pleasure to listen to. He made an argument that Thor was a more believable character than Superman because Thor's ability to fly relied on how hard he would throw his hammer and it would pull him, whereas Superman just flew because he's Superman. So seeing him was an absolute treat and is a memory I still cherish to this day. So to conclude, I once again would like to thank Stan Lee for his work and contribution to American popular culture. I would also like to offer my condolences to his family and friends who I'm sure are still suffering the loss of Stan. But his legacy will continue. Marvel is still producing movies, television shows, comics based on Stan's creation so a new generation can enjoy them. We're also about to send our students back to school, and I would not be surprised to see a bunch of kids running around in Avengers backpacks, Spider-Man t-shirts, and Hulk shoes. Those kids may not understand the origins of those characters like I do, but I sure hope they get the chance to. Because Stan Lee had an amazing gift for storytelling, and he shared it with the world. He lived by his now famous quote from Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility." So thank you, Stan. Thanks for everything, and thank you all for being here.